Jess, your womb is a house of miracles, and I'm not done with it yet.
Welcome to the Happy Home Birth Podcast, your source for positive natural childbirth stories and your community of support, education, and encouragement in all things home birth and motherhood. How would you feel if everyone around you, including the medical staff you've met with, says you shouldn't have another baby, but you and your spouse suddenly feel very strongly that you're being called to do just that, have another baby? What would you do? Hey there, happy home birthers, and welcome to another episode of the Happy Home Birth Podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Fusco, and this week we are speaking to Jess, a mother who had to make this difficult sounding decision. Should we grow our family in the face of adversity? You're going to love this story. I just know it. Now, before we jump in, I want to throw a little light on this episode's sponsor, Samaritan Ministries. It has been a dream come true to partner with Samaritan because I've been a member of this healthcare sharing organization for over 8 years. I've seen firsthand the blessings that have come with moving to a member-funded health share, especially as a small business owner. Knowing that each month I am paying to help other members cover their medical bills gives me such a sense of integrated community. I love sending a personal note letting the family know that we're thinking of them and taking the time to actually pray for whatever is going on in their life. And when I've had a medical need, it's been a breeze to submit my information to Samaritan and experience the blessing of other members sending me money to help cover my bills. Community is so undervalued these days, but not at Samaritan. If you'd like to explore what a healthcare share looks like, I've got a link just for you in the show notes. Fill out the information and a Samaritan team member will be in touch to answer any of your questions. As a thank you from me, you'll receive the first module of my childbirth education program, Happy Home Birth Academy, for free. All right, let's waste no time. Please remember that the opinions of my guest may not necessarily reflect my own and vice versa, and this show is not medical advice. It's an educational tool. So continue to take empowered responsibility for your health and your family. Jess, thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth Podcast.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Well, I'm thrilled as well. And luckily, it only took us 2 years to get you on here, original discussion. But as always, the Lord's timing, it worked out so perfectly, and we'll kind of see that unfold. But
Yes.
before we get into your stories, would you take a moment to introduce yourself and your family to the listeners?
Yeah, so I'm Jess. My husband is Grant, and we have 3 beautiful children. Willow, our firstborn, Jude, our second, and Noah is our sweet thirdborn, who was my home birth back in October of this year. I'm currently a stay-at-home mom, but have a background in a little bit of everything from marriage and family therapy to art to ministry. So I'm kind of a dabbler, and now I'm at home in this season.
I love it. I love to dabble as well, so I can deeply relate to that sentiment.
Yes.
Amazing. All right. So let's talk about this. You've had these 3 births. Let's just talk about where you were when you began to have children. So at the very beginning, when you were pregnant for the first time, what was your life like? What was your mindset like?
So when I was pregnant with my first, our daughter Willow, I was in grad school actually. I was finishing up grad school, which was a crazy season because I had like 12-hour long days. And, first trimester of pregnancy with 12-hour long days was a lot. And so I was just really young and really excited. So I was just like, yay, I'm starting motherhood. This is wonderful. And I didn't know anything about anything. And so I was just blissfully ignorant and along for the ride and found a random OB that got good reviews and went on this journey, which a big part of my journey is my sister, Kristen. She is the one who introduced my heart to home birth, which I'll get into, but she also is a doula. And so she kind of walked alongside of me through that pregnancy and answered my questions without ever pressuring me into learning more than I was willing at the time, honestly. And so, yeah, I was in that pregnancy and just kind of along for the ride, honestly. So I had my OB and I made it through that pregnancy to the end. It was honestly a really easy pregnancy, which was a gift in that season. I did have hydronephrosis, which is just like the swollen right kidney. And so it started to really hurt towards the end. But in typical fashion, my OB kind of instilled some fear around that. And I was just more so processing like, is there anything I can do to get out of this discomfort? But he was like, well, let's just induce you at 38 weeks, so it begins. I thought I had to do that. I felt really afraid that something bad was going to happen. And so I was like, let's do it. So I got induced at 38 weeks with my daughter, and the whole cascade of interventions begins. I had my Pitocin drip, and they were like, I was prepared for them to come in every 30 minutes and bump it one or two. They were coming in every 15 minutes and bumping it 5 notches. And so I'm feeling nothing still. I wasn't ready. And so I'm just sitting there like, yeah, I'm still good, still good. So they just keep bumping it until I'm at like a 35 or something, like just absurd amounts of Pitocin. And then they come in and break my water. When they broke my water, I immediately started with the most intense contractions. Like it went from 0 to 60. And I was so not prepared for that. And so those contractions were intense. I contracted like that for a few hours. Then I got an epidural. When they came in to give me the epidural, my anesthesiologist was a piece. And he was like, you need to hold still. You need to hold still. And, mid contraction, he's like, I got to go to the next room. Hold still so I can place this. And he was like, we need to give this girl a relaxant. She can't hold still for this epidural. And so they pump Finagrin into me and give me so much that I pass out and am out for the rest of my labor. And so that was like a huge thing I had to process afterwards because I just wasn't present for it. And so it's literally by the grace of God that I woke up for pushing. I think my body like jolted me awake enough for that. But even that, like my eyes were so heavy I could barely open them. It was just like I was doing everything I could to stay present for that. But so I start pushing, and they only let me push for 13 minutes, and they're like, we're just going to give you a episiotomy. You know, just the whole thing. So he gives me an
What?
episiotomy, and she's born. Of course, beautiful moment aside from everything. But I only was awake for like 2 minutes, and then I was passed out again for the next like 5 hours. So I don't remember my mom meeting her. I don't remember really important moments. There are pictures that I just like, my eyes are kind of open, but I don't remember, and that is upsetting. And so is this whole cascade. Then, of course, I'm having postpartum hemorrhaging, had to get a blood transfusion, just an iron transfusion, all the things afterwards. And of course, at the time, I'm just like, okay, I have a healthy baby, so I should be happy, that I rode that wave for as long as I could of just like, I need to be happy. Like, I have a healthy baby. I'm okay. It's all okay, and also did not take care of myself postpartum at all. And so it was just a rough, weird postpartum where I had so many feelings of shame and I didn't know why. But again, I just had this narrative in my head of like, I have a healthy baby, so I cannot complain. And that's kind of how I just moved on and moved forward from that. And really, it was then during that postpartum period when Kristen, my doula sister, got pregnant with her third and was planning her first home birth. And I was like, this is cool. Like, I'm all about it. I don't know anything about it, but I'm all about it. And she asked me to come and photograph it because another side thing I used to do is photography. And I was so honored to get to be there for her home birth, which was, I think, like 10 months after my birth. And so I got to be there for her home birth, and it was just incredible. Like, one of the most incredible things I had witnessed in my life up until that point. The peace in the room, I was just like, what? What? How can birth be like this? Like, this is so not what I ever knew was possible. And yeah, like her midwife was just like casually doing things. And like I could see her doing things, but I was like, she's not invasive at all. Like, she's so respectful of her. My sister, you could tell, just like felt in control and in charge of the moment. And so at peace, and her family was there, and it was just the most beautiful moment. And afterwards I was like, oh my gosh, I want that. Like, that is so incredible. And that kickstarted me going to therapy for processing my birth and realizing all that was tied up in it and all that the Lord was going to begin to work in my heart on. Yeah, it was just
How
incredible.
great that you went to process that you actively sought a way to heal.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I think at first, you just are so inward. There's just so much shame with motherhood. I
Mm.
tell new moms, like, you get pregnant and mom guilt starts. Like,
Mhm.
it is just the biggest attack of the enemy,
Oh
I
yeah,
believe.
so intentional. So intentional. Like let's make them feel like they can't do anything. Let's make them think they're not
Yes.
enough, they're confused. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that we need doctors to tell us exactly what we are to do about everything. And we have no mom gut or intuition
Mhm.
whatsoever. And if you do, don't listen to it because
Yeah.
it's going to lead you astray.
Yep.
Just the opposite of what the Lord's heart for mothers is.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that kind of is that one. And then as I processed all of that, we decide we're going to start trying for a second. And that's when I'm like, okay, I definitely want a home birth this time. And we start trying, and it took us almost a year for that one, which was different than our first. And so that was hard in and of itself, just the month processing every time taking the test and being like, and I know that doesn't even come close to others' journeys, which I just, oh my goodness, have so much empathy for. But it was actually, we were in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and the Lord called us to move to Greenville, South Carolina. And we didn't really know why. And it was 2 weeks after we moved here that we got pregnant. um, and so that pregnancy, I immediately, get plugged in for a home birth with some midwives. It was just basically the first midwife group that I found that did home births. And I got plugged in with them. And immediately that pregnancy was just different. It was really hard and I felt so off. Like I just knew within me that this something wasn't right. And then it wasn't until the anatomy scan when I got diagnosed with placenta previa. And so I was like, my midwives were basically like, there's a chance this moves, there's a great chance. If it doesn't, this is what will happen. You'll end up being a transfer and needing a C-section, all the things. And so it was like a week later that I had my first hemorrhage.
Oh, how far along were you?
I was 23, 24
Okay. Yeah.
weeks when I had my first hemorrhage, which was just terrifying. I mean, oh my goodness. You just think worst case scenario. And I remember we like called my sister, we called our midwife, and they were just like, just go straight to labor and delivery, which we were like, what? And so we went to Greenville Memorial downtown, and we were able to stop labor at that point with all the things, a mag drip, which was awful, steroid shots, all the things just to help kind of stall. And long story short, the rest of that pregnancy was me hospitalized for 2 months during COVID. So I had 5 more hemorrhages, and each one scarier than the one before. And just, I had a high risk team of doctors coming in and just constantly reminding me how there's a chance that I might not survive. There's a chance that Jude, our son, might not survive. And just telling me stories of like, you can't go on a walk too far because if you do, the last mom we cut her open only 4 minutes after she hemorrhaged and we lost the baby or whatever. Like just horrific stories being flooded into my head. And it was just a really dark season spiritually. Like I got really depressed and honestly, like started to partner with death a little bit, I think. Even just, you know, I would tell Grant, my husband, like, I can't picture my life outside of this. And it was the most depressing part of it all was, and this is gonna make me cry, but my at the time, 2-year-old daughter, Willow, because it was COVID, they wouldn't let her come in. And so the separation from her was just awful. And so I was like so conflicted, first time of 2 kids, mom. And I was just so torn of like, I want to care for this baby inside of me and I want to care for my baby out there. And so luckily I had one awesome nurse who was like, here's a way to sneak around the system. And she was like, you can go down to the parking lot and she can come for 10 minutes a day and you can like go sit on a park bench and read her books and whatever. And so we did that. And so we had dinners together down there every day, but it was just awful. And she would cry leaving every day. And so it was just really traumatic for her. And everyone and their dog told me, she's too young. She's not going to remember any of this. And I was like, you don't know my daughter. I know her. She's so receptive and in tune and intuitive. And to this day, she tells stories from that time.
Yep.
And so that whole story ended up in an emergency C-section at 32 weeks. So my son was born and I was put under for it. It was after like my last and final major hemorrhage. And so they did the C-section in, I think, 12 or 13 minutes, they said. Like it was insane. And so I woke up from that. I got to meet him the next day. Didn't get to hold him for another 3 or 4 days. He was actually born at 4 pounds, which was big for a 32 weeker. So that was a huge answer to prayer because we were just like, pack on the weight, Lord. I mean, a huge praise report that we thought we might have him at 24 weeks and I stayed pregnant until 32 weeks, So it was amazing. And of course, I'm so thankful for hospitals and C-sections and all of those things when they're necessary. And in that case, it was necessary. And so all the prep work I had done for a home birth helped me tremendously in that situation. I was way more prepared to sit with it. And every time I had to get a magnesium drip, if anyone's ever had one listening, they're not fun. And so I just would do my deep breathing, like as if I was in labor through that. And I was so thankful for the tools that I had learned at that point. So, yeah, that birth kind of wrapped up. And Jude is our little miracle boy. He was in the NICU for over a month. And we got released and got to bring him home. And it was so incredible. I mean, the amount, like I said, we had moved to Greenville just months prior, and our church family just came alongside of us like nothing we'd ever experienced before. And my family came alongside of us and Grant's family, and we just had the most support we couldn't have ever imagined or asked for. And I don't know how we would have gotten through that season without it. But then we came home, and of course, you're just like, all right, back to normal somehow.
Right. Like, what is that?
Right, exactly. Just go through this intense traumatic experience. And now, once again, I was dealing with those same feelings of like, just be so thankful. Like this could have ended so much worse. And I was so thankful. And there was a lot of trauma that needed to be dealt with.
Right.
And so that's where I learned my whole yes and situation, where two things can be true at once. And you can very much so feel immense amount of gratitude and immense amount of pain and sorrow at the same time. And you can hold those in the same hand. And so that was what the Lord just like wanted to teach me through that season, I really think.
Mm,
Yeah.
wow. So I'm assuming it took a little bit of time to process
Oh
all
my
of
goodness.
this. So as you're learning to do that, how did that influence the time between your second birth and your third birth? What was that processing like?
Yeah, it's funny you ask that because after, I go to my 6 week follow-up appointment after that. And they're just like, absolutely don't get pregnant again. This is not safe. And they tell me all the stats of why I shouldn't get pregnant again and that I'm very likely going to have this again. I have an increased risk now that I had the C-section and I've had it before and all these things. Um, they were like, it could end way worse next time. Like you got lucky, all the things. And so we were just like, oh my goodness. Which, by the way, side note, they wanted to do a hysterectomy when I had the C-section. And in the moment of me hemorrhaging, were wanting me to sign papers that I was
No.
like, no, I don't want to sign them. I don't know yet. And they were like, okay. But anyways, so they were just like strongly encouraging me, like, get on birth control, do everything you can to make this not happen again. And so we did, the best we could of just like, okay, we can't do this. And then we started to just settle into the fact that this is our story. We're a family of four. So thankful for these two beautiful children. But before that, my husband and I had always said we wanted a big family. And we very quickly like adapted, to the life with two kids. And we were like, no, this is what we want. This is easier. This is, we tried to create this narrative in our head that it's what we wanted, when in all reality, the Lord knew the desires of our heart, and this wasn't it. And so we told everyone we were done. Sold all of our baby stuff, all the things. And about a year and a half later, I remember we were on a date, and there was just this moment where we were both kind of like, so not totally sure that we're done. But I remember having so much fear. just being like, oh my gosh, I can't even think about that. Which is so kind of the Lord to kind of nudge you before it's time to kind of just gracefully let you in on it of like, hey, I'm starting to soften your heart to this, but don't worry. It's not a now thing. It's going to be, I'm going to have time to prepare you for this. He's just so kind like that. And just the way he was so patient with us. And so then after that moment, it was about, I don't know, 9 months later. And it was September of 23. And we were at a church service and it was during worship. And I heard the Lord speak to me so clearly, which, I mean, there are moments where you feel nudging from the Lord. And then there's moments where you're like, whoosh, that was the
Yep.
presence of God. I cannot deny what he told me. And I was worshiping to the song House of Miracles. And he so clearly told me, Jess, your womb is a house of miracles, and I'm not done with it yet.
Okay. Didn't know I was going to cry yet.
Yeah, it was just so incredible. And of course, like in that moment, I'm just weeping and worshiping and like, oh my goodness, like I cannot believe this. And then all of a sudden my humanity hits me and I'm like, oh no. And I'm like, you have to put Grant's heart on the same page because how on earth are we going to have this discussion and all of this stuff? And of course, the kindness of our Father, he does. And so after that service, we get to the car, and both Grant and I are like silent, which is rare for us. And so we were just kind of looking at each other, and he was like, so I kind of have something to share that I feel like God laid on my heart. And I'm like, my heart starts beating, like, okay, same, And he's like, I just basically says the same thing in his own words of like, we're not done. The Lord wants us to have another. And I just start crying and shaking. I'm like, oh my goodness, like, and so it's just undeniable that this was supposed to happen. And so then we were like, oh my gosh, how are we going to explain to people all the things? And of course, me at the time, I really struggled to share my whole life with everyone. I wanted to let everyone in on everything. Um, and I was like passionate about sharing everything. And it was so overwhelming. So we formulated this text to our family. And we sat and we prayed on it of like how we're gonna break the news to them that we're having another child, which is so different than normal.
Was
But
this
given
when you were actually pregnant or?
no, no, that's what I mean, like telling way too many details. So literally we formulate this text of like the Lord told us we're supposed to have another and we're gonna start trying and we just want to let you know. And I know there's a lot of fear, but we don't really want to hear it, you know? And so we send this text out to my family and to some of our close friends, and the responses were kind of what we expected of like, what? You're doing this? Like, oh my gosh, like, okay, we're gonna, believe with you, but also like, what? You're doing this? Are you sure? And I cried through every response that I got. Even though they're all so beautiful and well-meaning, just I was so tender and why I thought I needed to let everyone in on this, you know, beyond me. But it was just, yeah, this crazy thing. But in my head, I firmly believed, okay, the Lord released us to this, like we're gonna make a baby and we're gonna be pregnant this month.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I thought. And it was 5 months later. So and again, it took a minute. And it was, which is crazy side story during that. We knew that this was a promise of the Lord, right? That this would be a redemptive story. We knew that he was promising us a home birth. And we knew another piece of it was we knew that this would be redemptive for our daughter because of her experience with the last one. And we knew that there would be some fear that came up in her when she found out we were pregnant. And so we put her in therapy because she was processing so much just in having me be pregnant. But before that, she has her own super sweet relationship with the Lord. And so she's 4.5
About
at
to
this.
make me cry again, Jess. I
Oh my
already feel
goodness.
it.
Yeah, get ready. Get ready. This one makes me cry every time. So we were in the car driving in at one point and she's back there praying with her eyes closed and all these things. And we're just like, let her have her moment. And then she finishes. She's like, Amen. And we're like, what are you and God talking about? And she was like, oh, our baby. And we were like, our baby? And she was like, yeah, our baby's coming soon. I can't wait. And we were like starting to cry. We're like, what? What did he tell you? And she said, he told me our baby's coming in 7 weeks, like so confidently. And we were like, what? But then it clicks with me. I'm like, oh my gosh, because of course I'm tracking my ovulation and all this. So I pull out my little ovulation app and literally count. And my next time that I'm predicted to ovulate, not the next time, but the one after that is 7 weeks to the day.
Oh,
And
oh
so,
boy.
yeah. And so we were like, what? And of course, we try the next month, nothing. We try. And I take an ovulation test, ovulate on the day she said, and get a positive pregnancy test 2 weeks later. So she literally, the Lord spoke so clearly to her, which gave us so much hope in that time. And also, like, kickstarted her journey
Mhm.
of this pregnancy of like, the Lord
Healing.
has this baby. Yeah.
Oh, I'm just overwhelmed, Jess, because these are
No.
the stories this is what's been happening in my family for the last
Oh,
18 months, these stories of
oh,
hearing him speak so clearly and hearing him
oh.
speak to like my children hearing him speak
Yes.
so clearly and there is nothing there is nothing better and there is
Mm,
nothing that is more life-changing.
mm.
I've I've been saying to people, like, I don't care. I will live under a bridge. It doesn't matter to me what happens in my life as long as I have this connection,
Oh,
as long as I am able to hear him and
yes.
do what he's prompting. I don't care
Yes.
where it leads. It does not matter to me because it's such a gorgeous
Oh,
relationship. And oh, seeing it with your children, like, oh,
oh
thank
my
you.
gosh.
Thank you for sharing that. Whoa.
Yeah, thank you too. I mean, that's incredible. It's like I'm with you. There's nothing else that matters if you have that. Like, and even in my parenting, it's so shaped my parenting now of like, I don't care about behavior modification. I care about them knowing the heart of the Lord.
Mhm.
But oh my goodness. Okay, so let's see. We're at that point, and then we find out we're pregnant,
Of
and
course.
we're just so excited, like over the moon. Um, yeah, just so excited. So of course, the second I find out I'm pregnant, I'm like, midwives, da 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 da, October due date, like trying to find a midwife. And I start panicking because I did not know that VBACs at home were such a unique thing. And so every midwife is responding to me, oh, I'm so sorry, we don't do HBACs or VBACs at home, vaginal birth after cesarean. We don't do those. And I was just like, what? What do you mean you don't do these? Like, this is God's promise to me. Like, and so I'm literally like running out of options at this point. And I stumble upon Paris Mountain Midwifery, Janelle, and I see her Instagram actually of all things. And I'm like, okay, this girl is supposed to catch my baby. I just know in my heart. Um, and then I look at her little bio on Instagram and it says, currently not accepting any new clients. And I'm like, no, no, you have to, you know? And so I message her anyways because I'm like, listen, I need this. And so long story short, she brings us in and we like have our first meeting interview, if you will. And we were like, okay, we don't need to interview anyone else. Like, you're who we want. We want this. And she just immediately, like, her presence is just, I could go on and on about Janelle and the gift that she is to the birth world, but really just the gift that she is as a human being,
Ugh,
honestly.
I know.
Yeah, you know
I
her. So,
know.
you know, she's just such a gift. But then also just her vibe.
Mhm.
The Lord was so kind to give me somebody that I could vibe with. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, it just like, I mean, every one of our appointments, I felt like I was going to get coffee with a friend. Like, it was just so easy and fun. But then also, she's like so knowledgeable and has everything you could ever want her to have in a provider because she's got this whole tool belt filled, but she's just going to sit on it until she absolutely needs to use something. So you felt like you were in such great hands, but also not hands that were like, because I know this, let's just do it.
Right.
She
Right.
was very slow to incorporate anything unless absolutely needed. And so that pregnancy was just such a season of going inward and the Lord just really slowing me down And I kept hearing him say, like, no, you don't need to share that. Or no, you don't need to talk to people about that. Like, talk to me about it. I just spent countless hours with the Lord communing and processing all of my fears. I mean, of course, after the last one, I went to therapy again to process all that trauma. But then this time with the Lord, it was just so sweet, like really just marinating in his presence and in his promises. And I don't, just a bajillion scriptures he gave me for this pregnancy and delivery and all of his promises. Because, everyone in my life, so well meaning, so loving, so kind, were simultaneously wanting to hold hope with me and like, oh gosh, we really hope that it's not what it was. And, we really hope, like, everyone would tell me, wow, you're brave for
Oh,
having a home birth, our favorite thing to hear.
yeah, I love it.
Right. So annoying. And honestly, after having both, I'm like, no, you're brave for having a hospital birth and undergoing all that you went through. Like, you don't need that. Anyways, that's another story for another time. But yeah, so the whole thing was just like this going inward and spending so much time with the Lord and marinating in his promises. And Janelle was just so supportive of that too, of just like, yeah, what do you want to do? Like, let's figure it out. Here's what she would tell me all the options every time, which I loved because I wanted to hear them all. And then she would never tell me, I think you should do this or I think you should do that. It was just, here are your options. Where do you want to go with it? And then, like, she would jump on board with us with whatever it was. And she shared, that she has clientele of all kinds, that want to do everything and others that want to do nothing and basically free birth, like whatever it might be. She just has the wide spectrum of it. And so she's like, there's not a right or wrong. Like, here are your options. And just like to have somebody throw the power back in our court was just like, what? You're not going to tell me what I have to do? It was a little overwhelming at first, to be honest, because I was so used to somebody telling me, this is what's wrong. This is what we're going to do. Sign here.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was the opposite of just like, I don't know, what do you guys want to do? What do you think? We were like, what? And it was just the best. Like
Yeah.
it took some getting used to in the best way because I was deprogramming my brain, from what it once was. And so, yeah, the whole pregnancy was just incredible. Willow and Jude got to come with to so many of our appointments. She would hand them the Doppler and they would be like, hello, baby, are you there? And then put the baby on or the Doppler on the baby and hear Noah. And they were just like over the moon. Janelle gave me the idea to show like on YouTube, like have them start watching like animal births.
Oh, what a good
Yeah,
idea.
such a good idea. And so they loved it to this day. They're like, can I watch a hippo give birth? And I'm like, gladly. I love this.
Let's pull it up.
Yeah, right. And so we did that. And then, like, towards the very end, we watched some like gentle home birth videos to kind of prep them for that. And we practiced our low groan sounds so that they could get used to it all. And it was just so cool to have them be a part of it. So healing for Willow to get to be a part of it. And she was telling everyone, yeah, my baby's coming at home. My baby's coming at home. Like she was so proud of it. And it was just so sweet. And yeah, during that pregnancy, we even like opted out of some things. We had our anatomy scan. And of course, they found all sorts of stuff that they're like, they're soft markers for this and for that and all these things. And we're going to send you to the high risk team. And immediately I was like, no.
No, you're not.
Yeah.
Nope.
Nope. And so we went and talked to Janelle. She gave us all the downloads on everything. And she supported us in our decision to just stop going. And so we did not do any of the recommended things at that point, because I had one doctor doing the ultrasound straight up tell us, like, well, worst case scenario, you have this baby at home and they have X, Y, and Z and they die. Like, truly just horrific things to communicate.
Like, well, that would be worst case. Yeah. Like, thank you.
Right.
Okay.
And then, like, you do your own research and it's like 0.00008%.
Right.
And so, anyways, we just, again, kind of felt like we were supposed to keep some of that stuff really close to our hearts and journey throughout the rest of the pregnancy. And we did that. And, one of the promises of this pregnancy was that it would be full term, because that was obviously a fear after last time. And so I just remember holding so tightly to the verse in Malachi where it talks about like this the tithing storehouses, and it says, like, try me, put me to the test. Your crops will be abundant, for I will guard them from insects and disease. Your grapes will not fall from the vine before they are ripe. And that was just like such a word from the Lord in this season of like, your grapes will not fall from the vine before they are ripe.
Mm.
And
I
so,
also just love like the try me, try me,
yes,
put me to the
yes,
test. Like it's like no, it's an invitation. It's an invitation to that type of connection where you do feel safe enough. Like
yes.
try me. I'm so good.
Yes. And it's just like, oh, the intimacy with the
Mm.
Father throughout that pregnancy and afterwards has just been life-changing. I
Mm.
mean, I've known the Lord my whole life, grew up in a Christian home, but then really the hospital was like very traumatic and broke me down in a way that then taught me for my need for God. And then my word throughout this last pregnancy was rhythmic surrender or continual surrender. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna have to surrender. But I didn't realize I was gonna have to surrender like every day
Mm.
and surrender my fears every day. And it didn't mean that I hadn't surrendered the day before. I did, but
Yeah.
I had to
You
resurrender.
gotta get back down. You gotta let it
Yes.
roll all off your back again.
Yes. And so it was exhausting, but also just so beautiful of like this breaking of myself and getting me to the point of just surrendered at the Lord's feet of
Mm.
like, I'm all for women empowerment, but for
Sure.
me, this was like a breaking down of my power in the best way of like, and I'll get to that in the actual home birth, but it just came to a crux in that moment of like, I don't have the strength, but he does. And it was just so beautiful. So yeah, I make it, at this point to like 36 weeks, and I'm just like, like it just 36 weeks, 37 weeks, and it was like, oh my goodness, like my baby's gonna be okay, like, and it was just so amazing. And of course that hits, and then I'm kind of like, okay, I guess I'm gonna go into labor any day, And it was hilarious because I remember going in to see Janelle, or if she came for her home visit at 36 weeks to like drop off the birth tub and all that. And in my head, I'm like, all right, final countdown, here we go. And I saw her another 6 times before he was born. It was so funny. So the Lord was like, let me one up you. You're not just going to go full term. You're going to have him at almost 41 and 6. So it was just so hilarious. But so it went from me being like, I just have to make it to full term to then me passing my due date and slowly being like, oh my gosh, come on, come on. It was so funny. Yeah, after that point, it was just really like my birthday was September 30th. His due date was October 2nd. So we were like, oh, maybe we'll share a birthday, and my birthday comes and it goes. And then his due date comes and it goes. And we're just still pregnant. And it was so funny. Every time I walked into Janelle's office, she'd be like, still pregnant. And we would just kind of laugh about it. And yeah, so it was, I don't remember the exact timeline of everything, but the last few appointments, it was once I was like 40, almost 41 weeks, I was like, okay, he was measuring really large, which is fine. Big babies are not a problem. But he was measuring really large, and we were like, okay, wow, like, cannot believe we're still pregnant. This is crazy. And I ended up getting my membranes swept by Janelle. And I remember we went to the Children's Museum afterwards, and I'm like walking around being like, oh, I'm going to be in labor tonight. This is great. All these things. And nothing, literally nothing, felt nothing. And so we're like, okay. And Janelle's like, if you're still pregnant by the next time, because of course, a funny part of Janelle and I's relationship throughout pregnancy was that we were kind of bartering. I'd be like, well, what if I'm still pregnant at this point? She'd be like, well, let's make it 2 more days. And then we'll see. Let's see the likelihood of you still being pregnant at this point. And it was just, we were bartering the whole time of what we would do when. And so I go in for another one and get a membrane sweep and stretch and nothing. And then I remember I woke up and I had my bloody show and I was like, oh my gosh, here we go. And so I text Janelle, I'm like, had my bloody show. We're going into labor, all the things and nothing. Literally, I'm like just stuck. There is like no progress being made. Not to mention, he was a big boy and his head was in my pelvis, like And to this day, I can feel this little guy's noggin and I just feel it in my, and so we do all these things and then there's nothing. And so I remember our plan was always we want to be a hospital transfer if we have to be at 41 and 6 because Janelle had told me if you go to 42 weeks, they're kind of like, oh, 42 weeks, we're just cutting you. But if you say you're 41 and 6, they're kind of like, all right, we'll try to induce you and give you a little time or whatever. And so that was just kind of our plan. And so everything we did was leading up to that timeline of like, okay, let's try to make it so that if we have to transfer, we're going to be at 41 and 6. And so we did the final thing, which was having Janelle come and break my water. And we decided for her to do it in the evening which was a divine idea from my husband, because he was like, your body hasn't really responded to anything so far. So if it does respond, it'll probably take a minute. So wouldn't it be nice to like get a night's sleep and whatnot? And everyone was like, you might go into labor right away. So it could be bad timing. But we felt like the Lord told Grant that. And so we got it. My water broke that night, which was a Saturday night. And Janelle came over and I just remember it like all became so real having her in our birth space, breaking my water. And I got the shakes real bad. Just that adrenaline, like, oh, this is happening. And she broke my water and nothing happened. You guessed it. So I sleep through the whole night, and my mom and Grant are like fully expecting me to wake them up in the middle of the night, being like, I'm in labor, and nothing. I like mosey down in the morning and I'm like, hi, still here, still pregnant. Just insane. Which I forgot a piece of the story. I took the midwives brew a few days prior with nothing.
Whoa.
Yes.
Like this baby was like, mm-mm, not
Yeah.
yet.
Nope. Not yet. I'm in here, guys. I'm good. I'm just chilling. And it was so the kindness of the Lord. Like I constantly felt his movements and I like knew that I knew that I knew he was good and he was okay. But oh my goodness, really the last week was such a breaking down process of like starting to have to wrestle with the idea of like, whoa, did we hear his promise wrong? Did like what is happening? We were just both so emotional of like, are we going to be a hospital transfer? And of course, shout out to your podcast. I listened to all of the stories literally throughout my pregnancy, which were so beautiful and so helpful to me to wrap my head around. Transfer is not a failure. It's beautiful in and of itself. And even, all the different aspects of everything just so prepared me for all of it. And so, although it was emotional, I felt very prepared. So, thank you because, oh my goodness, what a difference this podcast makes. Every time any of my friends get pregnant, even if they're like, oh, I'm just having a hospital birth, I don't really know anything. I'm like, listen to Happy Home Birth podcast. Listen to all of them, please.
Thank you, Jess. That's so
Yeah.
kind.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's such an incredible resource. And I'm thankful my sister introduced me to it. But yeah, so it was just such a breaking down. And that day on Sunday, we woke up still pregnant, still feeling nothing. And so I was like, let's just, go get outside. And we went to the pool parking lot because that's where our kids can ride their bikes and play with chalk and all this stuff. And I just remember curb walking the entire pool parking lot, being like, all right, final straw, here we go. And it just was like, I was starting to wrestle in my head with the idea of being a hospital transfer. And because at that point, what we were comfortable with was like my water being broken for 24 hours. And if I didn't have any labor symptoms starting, then being a hospital transfer and getting induced there and whatnot. And so Janelle was just like, just stay calm. You have time. You have time. And we were like, we really don't. We really don't have time. Like in our heads, we're like, no, we don't. I remember coming back from the pool parking lot and feeling a little crampy. And I was like, no, no. You know how you like try to tell yourself this is not real. And I did not want to get my hopes up at that point because I was like, I'm starting to finally wrap my head around being a hospital transfer. And I was like, I like write it off that it's nothing and whatever. And then Grant and I talk, and through many tears, we decide that we're going to have to tell the kids, like, just to start prepping them, like, okay, mommy's probably going to go to the hospital tonight. This is probably what's happening. But listen, like, it's different than last time. Like, we try so hard to explain everything, and Willow cries, which just, oh my gosh, to break your child's heart like that. It was just excruciating. And it was such a hard moment. And so we just said, there's still some time, but if we get to tonight and nothing's happened, like this, what's going to happen? You're going to stay with Mimi, but you'll get to come the next day and meet, just all the things. It was just so awful to have to communicate. And then I'm still kind of crampy at this point. I'm like, okay, this is weird. And so what I always do is just lay down because, right, if you lay down and they stop, it's nothing. And so I'm like, I'm just going to lay down for a bit. And I lay down and they kind of get a little more intense. And then I start to notice like a pattern to them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And so I remember texting Grant to come upstairs because I didn't want the whole entourage of everyone coming up. I was like, come up here. And he comes up and lays with me and he just like felt in his spirit. He was like, babe, this is it. Like you're in labor. I just know. And I feel such a peace from the Lord. Like you're having your home birth. And I just started crying, like just breaking down I'm like, his promise is true. Like I was starting to doubt. And like, then all of his promises start flooding my mind again. And all of these scriptures start flooding my mind. And I like get centered and I'm like, we're doing this. Like, this is happening. And the redemption is like literally playing out right now. And so it's just so beautiful. And so we kind of like realize, okay, I'm in labor. This is early labor. And then, you start going in your head of like, wait, what did I want to do in early labor again? What was my idea? Because you just can't think straight in the moment. And so I go downstairs and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna watch a show, like take it easy. And it was like 10 minutes into the show that I was like not able to talk anymore. And contractions were like 3-4 minutes apart, lasting a minute. And I was just like, okay, here we are. Like, this is real. And both Grant and my mom were like, okay, those picked up quickly. We need to text Janelle and your doula and the birth photographer, like all the people. And so, and I got somebody to help with childcare so my mom could come in the room. And so we text all these people and I'm like, okay, I can't focus anymore. I'm going upstairs and like getting in my little cove. I get in my cove and I just like, now what I know is that I was like transitioned to active labor. But at the time I was like, oh no, is this early labor still? Like you don't know. And the crazy part about my stories is as a third time mom, I kept telling Janelle, I feel like a first time mom because I've never experienced it. I've never experienced going into labor or even being present for my birth. And so I felt like it was first time, even though I had all this experience. So I just was in active labor and the doula gets there and she was amazing. Destiny, she was just awesome at keeping me hydrated, doing hip squeezes, all the things. Well, Grant just laid there and was reading my scripture verses over me that I had written down. And we just kept like inviting the Holy Spirit's presence in. And there were a few times like I was breathing through stuff and I would just be like, okay, pray me in, everyone. I need recentered. I need to resurrender once again. And it was actually so beautiful. Willow came in the room after she woke up from nap and she like came and laid with me and I was like, baby girl, we're having him at home. Like you get to be here for it. And she just started tearing up like these just crocodile tears in her eyes through this big smile. Like she was just over the moon. And she held my hand and that's all I needed was her handhold. And it got me so centered and just like ready to do this thing. And so then Janelle got there and I'm already in labor land at that point. So I like couldn't even talk or anything. And I'm in the shower and on the bed and with the peanut ball and with the birth sling, like I'm all over the place. And then I remember Janelle and my doula being like, why don't you go try to have a few contractions on the toilet, dilation station. And oh my goodness, worst thing on the planet. Like literally the toilet. Oh my goodness. I mean, it's so productive, so it's amazing. But also, I was like, I hate this position. Get me off the toilet. And so then after that, I was like, I'm wanting to get in the tub already, but I'm afraid if I get in the tub now, I'm going to be in the tub for 12 hours. All this stuff. I was like, my hands are going to be pruny.
And we cannot have that.
Right. And they were like, you're fine. Like, it's okay, Jess. And Janelle was like, you get in the tub, and if you want to get out of the tub, get out of the tub. Get back in. There's no rhyme or reason. And I went, oh, I can do that? You know how in the moment you just like literally lose everything you've ever known? And you're like, I can't think straight. And so the process just continues. And I remember at the time, I was like, beforehand, I was not going to get any cervical checks because they just really mean nothing, right? And so that was my goal. And then I'm like in it, and I think I'm still in early labor, and I panicked because it's hard. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. Like those thoughts start filling my head. And I just keep having to resurrender to the Lord. He's like, resurrender to me, resurrender. And then the Hebrews verse of like, let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise.
Woof.
Yeah. And then in Luke, for no word from God will ever fail. And I'm like, okay, I know these promises to be true. Like I just kept saying them over myself. And so then I'm like, Janelle, I think I want you to check me. And she's like, it's okay if you do, but it's okay if you don't too, whatever's fine. And so I'm finally like, okay, like I'm shaming myself in the moment. And they're like, stop shaming yourself. Stop. And so I'm like, okay, just check me. I do want to be checked. And she was like, girl, you're at a 7. And I was like, what? I am? Like, I was so excited. And everyone like cheered. My sisters are on FaceTime, by the way, like cheering me on. Um, and I'm like so excited. And then all of a sudden I'm like, but no, I hear stories all the time of people stalling at 7s. And I go, see, this is why I shouldn't have gotten checked. Like, it doesn't mean anything. So funny. And so I get myself into a little tizzy. And I'm like, my blood pressure starts to drop a little bit and I get flustered and like a little faint. And this moment I distinctly remember because there's a sweet picture of it. But Janelle and Grant are like both sitting. I'm like sitting on the edge of my bed and they're both like by one knee, holding me up and just like calming me down. And I just think if I were in the hospital in this setting, they would have been like, her blood pressure's dropping, da, 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 sound the alarms, and they just both were like, hey, it's okay. And Janelle's like rubbing my back and kind of like trying to look me in the eyes. And Grant is like, I've got this. Like, he was awesome because I used to pass out all the time early in our marriage. And so he like knows how to calm me down in those moments. And so he just calmed me down. And Janelle was like, okay, Grant. Like, she just kept telling Grant the whole time, like, you are a star husband. Like, you just know what to do in every circumstance. And she was so proud of him for knowing where to put the hose on the birth tub. She was like, I'm going to call you in and have you give all of the husband's lessons.
I love it.
So funny. But so, anyways, it was just like this beautiful moment. And of course, I like came back to and was totally fine. Right. And so that moment, Janelle was like, hey, Jess, why don't you give me 5 more contractions on the toilet? I think that's what would really help. And I was like, you're crazy. No. Like, I was so mean to Janelle. You know how you like choose somebody to let it out on? Most of the time, I feel like people let it out on their husbands. I like chose Janelle as my person to be mean to, which says that I felt really safe with her. But it was hilarious because she like went into like coach mode. Like, and we laughed about it afterwards. She's like, why was I acting like a football coach?
I can just see it.
And I was like, because I was acting like a stubborn freshman.
Too good.
So funny. But so I was like, no, I'm not giving you 5. She's like, how about 3? And I was like, no, I'll give you 1. So it was just hysterical. So I go and I have 1 contraction on the toilet and it was awful. And I was like, but looking back, that's totally what kickstarted me into transition. And so I get back in the birth tub at that point, and the next like 20, 30 minutes, he was born like 20 or 30 minutes later. But that 20 or 30 minutes was truly the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I was, so we'll find out later in the story, but he ended up being 10 pounds, 2 ounces.
Okay.
And he was a bit,
That's just a teensy little thing.
little guy after my 4-pound preemie.
Whoa.
So crazy. And so his head was like lodged into my pelvis, descending. And it was just like my body was angry. Like, I don't know how to describe it, like trying to get him out. And the contractions were just so intense. And I went through like this deep moment of like, I can't do this. Like, I was screaming it out. I can't do this. I can't do this. And I had sworn beforehand, I'm like, nope, I'm not going to say I can't, And in the moment, I was like, I can't, Janelle. Like, I'm being serious. This is too hard. And she was like, you're okay. Like, just so calm. And she'd be like, surrender, Jess. She didn't even know my word. And she would say, just surrender, Jess. You can do this. Just surrender. And I remember being like, at one point so mad I like punched my birth tub. Like I was an angry birther during transition, which is so different than I wanted to be. I wanted to be this peaceful, beautiful, breathe my baby out gently. And I was angry. And I remember at one point being like, Lord, have mercy on me. And it was just hard. It was so hard. And I realized in that moment, it was like the Lord so clearly told me, do you see, like it was like a father gently like trying to shake his child, like, look at me. Do you see me? And I like looked at him and locked eyes with him and felt like he said, you like this is how you've spent your life trying to do things within your own strength. And I want to do them for you. Like, will you let me be your strength? And I was just like weeping and trying to recenter myself. And like, then this moment happened where the ring of fire happened. I knew what to expect there. And I actually loved that feeling. That was a weird one where like it was just so motivating to me to feel that. Like I was like, oh my gosh. And I remember being like, it burns. And then it clicked with me. I'm like, oh my gosh, like he's coming out. Noah's about to be here. And I remember like that moment that I had with the Lord, the very next contraction, I birthed his head. And so his head came out and it was just so beautiful. And I remember I like reached down and felt his head. It's so funny because TMI, but I have dealt with some awful hemorrhoids. And so I felt his head and I go, Janelle, is that a hemorrhoid?
Just gotta check. I just need to know.
She goes, no, that's his head. And so I was like, okay. And I recenter myself and, also the kindness of the Lord in the midst of labor and transition and all of it. Like, I feel like he gives us this moment right before they're born where all of a sudden you have like an elongated period between contractions, where it's like this calm before the final push. And I remember being like, okay, like I'm getting resurrendered. And I felt like, whoosh, I now know that I don't have the strength to do this, but how incredible that my loving Father wants to be my strength. And so it was just this incredible moment. And I remember just like one thing Janelle kept saying that was so helpful to me was like down and out. I had practiced so much and I practiced like breathing through like pain or pressure or whatever, but I hadn't aimed it. And so that's something like for a future one that I would totally have in my mind is like down and out is just so helpful when you're like channeling your energy. And so I just remember feeling that way. And I had the next contraction came and I just like did the horse lips. And that's like how I ultimately pushed him out. And I just remember Janelle saying, Jess, grab your baby. It's like the most incredible moment. Like, I just can't even thinking back to it. It just like takes me there instantly again. And I just turned around and was like crying my eyes out and praising God and couldn't believe it. And I just bring this beautiful, huge child onto my chest. And Janelle like casually undoes the umbilical cord around his neck. And it's just so natural. I look at it. I'm like, I have this weird thing right now where I want to suction him. Like I wanted to put my mouth over his nose and mouth, which I remember on yours, you saying you did. And Janelle was like, do it. And so I did it in like weird flavor,
A little salty.
a little salty, but I just did it. And then like, I just start patting his back and he lets out this big cry. And it was like, oh my gosh, the most beautiful moment ever. And Grant's like with me and we're just crying together. And just like minutes, what felt like seconds later, my kids came in and come and just see him. And they're both like, Jude, the 2.5-year-old's like, what? Like, what? Where did this come from? Where's your belly? Where's the baby? I'm so confused. And Willow like gets in and she's just so excited. She's literally like giggling. And so it's just this beautiful moment. And then of course, like I go to the bed and deliver the placenta, all the stuff, and I just get to have this blissful high of Noah on my chest, uninterrupted, just incredible. And like Janelle came with all the tools necessary. Like he did have to get some compressed air afterwards, just from having some meconium in his lungs and stuff. And she just did it while he's on my chest. He needed it for like legitimately like 40 seconds, I think. And that was it. Like, but Janelle told me afterwards, like they for sure would have taken him. to NICU.
Wow.
And I'm just like, thank you, Jesus. Like, that's not what he needed. He needed his mother's skin,
Yeah.
his mother's breast. He needed just a little compressed air, and that was it. Like, we, there was no fear that needed to be there. There was no separation that needed to be there. Like, he had all he needed at home with me. And it was just so beautiful and so healing. And it was just this high. Like, oh my gosh, the afterbirth high was, I was riding that high for days. Like, it was just incredible. And I felt so present and in the moment and just so happy. Like, I remember just having a smile on my face for, like, I couldn't wipe it off for days. Like, and like Janelle stitched me up and I'm just smiling through it. Like, I'm just like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Like, it was just incredible.
Wow. I mean, it's so beautiful to hear that after hearing the other two scenarios that were just so, shockingly different, and the
Yeah.
inability for you to be present, not your choice, and then to
Hmm.
be able to be there and just soak it all in and receive all of those hormones that are so
Yes.
divinely created,
Mm.
and just to be able to snuggle that little chunk.
Yes.
Oh, amazing.
Oh my gosh, it was literally the best. And then of course Janelle weighed him, hours later or whatever, and we were all like, what? Because it was so funny when we got pregnant. We told Janelle, we're like, for some reason we feel like this is going to be a huge baby. And she was like, okay, we'll see. And I'm like, I don't know why. I just have this like mom gut feeling. And sure enough, her biggest baby of the year.
Oh, wow. Good job, Noah.
Yeah, he's
You won an
awesome.
award.
He's awesome. And now he's not even 6 months old and he's 22 pounds. So,
Okay. Um, my almost 2-year-old is like, like 26.4 pounds. He's like, not that.
right, literally, he's massive. He is massive.
That
He
is
like
awesome.
his weight gain just never stopped. He's just,
He's just
and not to
cruising.
mention he was 23 inches long.
Woo, he's a long boy.
So
Wow.
just like he was just massive and perfect in every way. So yeah, it was just incredible. And then the postpartum phase too, like I learned so much about that throughout the pregnancy. And so I really did the whole like 7 days in bed, 7 days by the bed, and then 7 days in the house, which was so helpful and healing. Oh my goodness. Like that was by far my best postpartum period I've ever had. I'm still riding the high of it. I
Mm,
mean, it is just like, oh, I cannot express that enough to moms. It's like, take care of yourself afterwards.
yeah. Yeah.
It just like, oh, from not having done it the first 2 times to doing it, the difference it makes is just incredible.
Yes. Vast and long lasting is the thing.
Yes.
It's like it's not just for those first few weeks where it's like, "Oh, good, I'm doing it and it's fun." Like, no, it is for 18 months down the road.
Yes.
It's unbelievable.
Exactly. Literally. It is so, so true.
Yeah.
So long lasting.
Gosh. Okay, Jess, this has been just so incredible.
Mm.
And as we're here at the end, I kind of want to tie everything up because your story has just been so gorgeous. And I would
Mhm.
love to give you an opportunity just to kind of share with the listeners, what is it? Like, what is it that you feel like you gained, gleaned, learned from this entire story?
Mm. Oh my goodness. Well, I think a few things that I would just love to share are God does still speak. He gives words,
Amen.
and you can hold him to his words. You can try him, put him to the test. Like the verse said, he holds true to those words, and he writes a better story than we do. His redemption story is so beautiful, and it's modeled throughout pregnancy and birth. And it's a glimpse of heaven when that baby's put on your chest. Like it is truly a glimpse of heaven. And to resurrender, to allow the breaking to happen, even if you've been through trauma or different experiences through birth or elsewhere, like allowing him to heal those parts of you, but then also to like take you through things that allow for healing,
Mm,
and don't, the biggest thing too is like, yes, healthy baby and healthy mom are number one priority, of course. And there's more. There is more to the story. There is more for you. There is more that God has for you in this. Like, it is a beautiful part of the story that he has written and that we get to partake in. And we only get to do it, a couple times, maybe if we're lucky. And so don't miss it, like partake in your birth, partake in your pregnancy and in your postpartum, because it is just grounds for the Lord to do incredible, incredible things.
Wow. I just have to, something that you said though, Jess, just, in the breaking and then the building
Mhm.
back up, it just reminded me of Isaiah 61:1,
Mm,
where he said this is actually in Isaiah 61:1, but it's also how Jesus started his ministry when he came up and read this verse and said, "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has
mm,
sent me to bind up the brokenhearted,
mm,
to proclaim liberty to the captives and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to bind up the brokenhearted, to take those pieces just that you had, when we experience trauma, we do fracture, we do
mm,
fraction our hearts into these separate
mm,
pieces, we compartmentalize. What does the Spirit of the Lord do? He sends Jesus to bind up the brokenhearted. And
mm.
what a beautiful example of that your story is.
Oh, oh, I love that so much.
Mm.
Oh, I didn't know I was gonna cry so much, to be
Well,
honest.
neither did I. I didn't know exactly where we were going today. This has been, oh, but this is what happens. This
So
is the
good.
stuff that happens where it's just like, oh gosh, you are just in these details. And
Yes.
what's so clear to me is that there is somebody, there is at least one person out there
Mm,
where this story was for them. And
mm,
they needed to hear this, and they needed to hear that there is a creator father
mm,
who wants to bind them up. Like,
mm. Thank you, Jesus. Yes.
yes, yes, that is for you.
Mm.
So, with all of that being said, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Jess,
Yeah.
thank you for reaching out, whatever, 2 years ago, whenever it was, and
Mm.
us thinking we were going to do this podcast episode then, but then that's when the Lord was like, actually, Caitlin, stop right now. You're done.
Yeah.
Today, you're
Yeah.
done. And and then like for it to come back and starting the podcast back,
Mm.
this is
Yeah.
week 2 of re-entering into this podcast, re-entering into this journey, the whole focus being identity. And here comes Jess with
Oh,
her story of redemption, her story of her identity in the Lord. Just
praise
who
God. Yeah.
who else could have done it? Who else could have
Right.
done it? And here it
Mm.
is. It's just gorgeous. So all of
Oh,
that being said, Jess, thank you so much for sharing your heart, your story. Thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth podcast.
yes. Thank you so much.
Whoa, are you blown away? I know I am. Let's jump into our educational tidbit before finishing up with our episode roundup. In this episode, we heard about an experience with true, complete placenta previa. Now, in the case of true placenta previa, medical attention is clearly needed. What's important to understand, though, is that placenta previa is not a common occurrence. And when it does happen, you would expect to experience clear symptoms like bright red vaginal bleeding. Here's the amazing part that I want to focus on. Many mothers get diagnosed with placenta previa, at least partial placenta previa, via ultrasound around the time of their anatomy scan. As the medical establishment is oft to do, they can get moms in a tizzy and make them feel hopeless about their situation, adding just one more thing to freak out about. Here's what I want you to know. The placenta is beautifully designed to move, and it moves in 2 ways. First, it moves by the growing of the uterus itself. As the uterus grows, this alone can pull the placenta up and out of the way of the cervix. And the other way? Well, this might blow your mind, but the placenta can also crawl up the side of the uterus on its own. It has these little tendrils, basically, that allow it to creep up. So, if you are one of the mothers at the anatomy scan who is told she has a low lying placenta and will possibly have to give birth by a C section, remember your placenta is powerful, as is your mind. Take time each day to rest, relax, and envision your placenta moving away from the cervix. Picture your uterus growing and the placenta moving up with its growth, and picture it crawling up your uterus out of the way of the cervix. Inside of Happy Home Birth Academy, we spend time dedicated to listening to guided relaxation tracks and using the beautiful power of your imagination to picture your labor, birth, and more. I find this to be one of the most important ways to prepare for my own births, and I've seen it be a game changer for many of my students. Click on the link in the show notes if you're ready to receive childbirth education specifically for you as a home birth mother. As we head into this week's episode Roundup, I want to reflect on a few incredible points. So, if you listen to my reintroduction story, you'll notice that the exact same themes that I spoke about hearing God's voice and leaning into what He's saying, even when it sounds, frankly, illogical, were present here in Jess's story. She and her husband Grant both felt an overwhelming peace and need to have their third child, despite their well-meaning community's pleas for them to reconsider. I find so much comfort in this ability to hear something clearly coming from somewhere outside of yourself and to put your faith in what you are sensing. This is so deeply connected to intuition. Mothers know what to do, whether that's the intuitive knowledge that everything is okay and they're doing exactly what they need to be doing, even when the situation looks questionable, or when things seem fine, but a mother knows something is not fine and needs more attention. What a beautiful gift. Next, let's talk about the healing power of birth. Birth can bring healing beyond just for yourself or your spouse. In this story, we hear how Jess's third birth acted as a soothing balm to her oldest daughter, Willow, who had experienced so much pain during the traumatic hospital stay of her mother and birth of her baby brother. And that brings me to the last point. We were designed to heal. We were designed to heal both physically and emotionally. How beautiful is it to hear this story where Jess's body, which was spoken over so negatively, that it wouldn't be able to have a healthy pregnancy and birth again, that it was incapable of pregnancy and the labor processes. It healed and it experienced new life. Along with physical healing, Jess and her entire family experienced emotional and spiritual healing. How amazing that we have been designed with so many opportunities to grow, to rewire, to renew our thoughts. This family did just that, and what a joy it was to listen to how it unfolded. Okay, my friends, let that one reverberate in your mind over the next week. How beautiful. That's all I've got for you for today. I'll see you back here next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Are you looking to extend the home birth support, encouragement, and education? Join us in our Facebook group, Happy Home Birth Podcast Community, and check us out on Instagram at Happy Home Birth Podcast.